Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about my top 10 of 2014. The thing with doing a top 10 list is often I don't like doing them, and I don't like the idea of ranking films. I often go, oh, maybe I won't do one, maybe I won't rank them, I'll just have 10 movies and people can figure it out, maybe I'll have a bunch of ties, and ultimately you kind of, if you're reviewing films, you kind of have to do it. I don't know if I would feel this way about this top 10 list in 2 years, or if 10 years later I rewatched these 10 films and reevaluated it, or saw what had become a bigger deal since then and watched those and so forth. And honestly, I'll probably end up reviewing more 2014 movies after this list goes up. It's not definitive, it's how I felt about the cinematic year of 2014 at the end of 2014, at the beginning of 2015, more so at the beginning of 2015. The problem with any year is that there's a lot of great films every year, and I kind of wish I could just do a list of all the movies that I liked and I thought were good films and I want people to check out and have kind of like an honorable mentions or recommendation list. But then I decided just to do these top 10. So here is my top 10 of 2014. Number 10, Night Moves. The majority of this film is set around them getting the materials to bomb the dam, but then there's also a section of the film where they have to deal with the consequences of that. I was kind of surprised how Kelly Reichardt could still have this film move. All her films are, I guess, kind of slow, the kind of art film slowness that goes throughout these films, but it still was really tense. And I think the problem with thrillers most of the time is they always have to feel very Hollywood. They always have to be a conventional kind of film nowadays. I don't see very many thrillers that have fun with the genre and do a different twist on it like Night Moves does. That shows how good of a director she is. She's taking on genre, using the film noir thing with Kelly Reichardt's usual style. It follows a genre, but then it's really slow and a slow burn. And I think if I watched films that were almost the same length, these certain things would happen at the exact same times. But because of the slow movingness to it and the ordinariness to it and the lostness of these characters and the way she does her films, it felt different somehow. That's kind of slower and simpler as it might feel, and I think she's really known for her minimalism. There's a lot more in there than you'd really expect. Number 9, Inherent Vice is a crazed California stoner comedy that has a bunch of different genres colliding into itself in a really glorious mess of a movie. And it's really a joy to see kind of this sketchbook, late 60s, early 70s inspired. All this takes place in 1970, so weird sunshine noir of a movie that Inherent Vice isn't afraid to throw at you. Inherent Vice has visual jokes that are right out of the Zucker kind of films. It has Cheech and Chong humor, it has a really dumb joke with a frozen banana, but it also has really heartwarming parts. It has very deep parts. It really reminds me of things like Brewster McCloud, but I think Paul Thomas Anderson is having more fun and colliding more genres than those directors would really try to attempt to do. He just wants to play with all these different toys, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but if you just go with it. He understands the visual poetry in comedy as well as drama as well as noir, and he wants to play in all of it and make this kind of crazy film. Number 8, and the only time I've put a Marvel movie on my top 10 list, Guardians of the Galaxy. When Marvel Studios works, they're really super Hollywood, big blockbuster, audience-friendly films, and Guardians of the Galaxy definitely falls in that tradition. And James Gunn, despite having darker moments in this film and having weirder characters like Groot or Rocket Raccoon, it's kind of an odd cast of characters, this whole group, and they all have unique personalities, not just the way they talk, but the way they move physically, the way they fight. Their personalities are all throughout their characters. It's really a very well-defined, fun group. James Gunn really kept that energy going. Some movies have this kind of party energy to them that just keep everybody up, so that you're just kind of with it and you don't really mind sitting there and watching this film, even if you're not someone who's a moviegoer regularly. What I think a lot of those audiences don't realize is because they really understand all the characters. Every character is so well defined. That's something Marvel Studios has done very well. That's something I really like about them, but it's mainly about certain characters, and there's certain arcs to like Peter Quill and Gamora and Rocket Raccoon and Groot and Drax. You understand that and you're connected to them because of James Gunn's energy, and that he can do so many weird, quirky, odd things but still make an audience-friendly film. Number 7, The Guest. The Guest is the kind of great genre filmmaking that makes you love genre filmmaking. It's an incredibly well-made, well-constructed, beautifully directed piece of genre filmmaking. Adam Wingard constructs this so perfectly. It's like he knows the bare bones and the blueprints of genre filmmaking and knows how to control them. He directs this so immaculately well. But the more I thought about The Guest, I realized, holy shit, this is fucking Shane. This is evil horror movie Shane. It's like if Shane and the stepfather had a baby, it would be really messed up, but it would be The Guest. And that's the genius behind Adam Wingard did. It started to occur to me, holy crap, he really gets how to be a B movie maker, more so than a lot of B movie makers do. What Adam Wingard does in this film is simply amazing and awe-inspiring, and it shows what a great genre director can do. And you can see through this that he's influenced by Carpenter and Walter Hill and early James Cameron. And all those things I loved growing up with, watching VHSs in my basement and then buying the Blu-rays later. And Adam Wingard shows all of that and does that in the way that the people who made those films did, because they were watching midnight movies in their basements. And it kind of shows a natural evolution to the style in a way that a good genre filmmaker, a good student of filmmaking should be. Number 6, The Babadook is a proper, well-directed, spooky horror film. It is the kind of horror film that will leave you unnerved. Really talking about the issue of having a problem with someone who's taking over your life, who's maybe isn't the best person. This single mother looking after her child who's an absolute terror, who has behavioral problems, and realizing your kid might not be the best person, but you're responsible for them and have to care for them. The Babadook comes in and terrifies you, but also makes you think about a certain issue the way a really great horror genre film can. You can't escape that this is about motherhood and taking care of people, and the idea of, if you're a mother, you're supposed to love your children and love that they've taken over your life and taken all your free time, and that's pretty much all you're doing is taking care of this kid who's kind of ungrateful and will say pretty horrendously horrible and embarrassing things in front of you, and you're just supposed to deal with it and love it all the time. What's really interesting is it brings in that idea and it uses that idea really well, but almost plays with it and twists your perception of these characters. It wants to play with you as an audience member and what you thought of certain characters, and Samuel and Amelia, and what you think of them early on in the film is subverted to say even more. And now for the top 5 of 2015. Number 5, Obvious Child. The romantic comedy is a genre that's kind of been in a bit of a rut for a decade or so. It certainly isn't as popular as it used to be. And I think one of the cliches of romantic comedy is they're very Hollywood. They're not real. Obvious Child is a evolution of a genre, because Obvious Child is about a woman played by Jenny Slate, who is a Brooklyn comedian who has a one-night stand with a guy and then gets pregnant and decides she's going to have an abortion on Valentine's Day, no less. But between the time she has scheduled the abortion and when it is going to take place, she falls more and more in love with the guy. It still takes the beats of a romantic comedy while not feeling very fake and Hollywood, but also feeling very digestible and very easy to go down and kind of the things you'd expect for a romantic comedy. It feels very light, but it's not really light about its subject matter. When you look at a film like this, it kind of shows where the romantic comedy genre could go. It feels so much like a rom-com. It has the soul of a rom-com, but it's far more progressive and far more real and far more like the kind of rom-com that we should have at this point, rather than the rom-coms we did have, or the cliches, or the unrealistic expectations that we kind of laugh at and love. Obvious Child doesn't do that. Number 4, The Lego Movie. A lot of the humor doesn't feel like kid humor, it just feels like good humor. They're just that good at it. It almost reminds me of what's going on with kids' cartoons like Cartoon Network and even Disney Channel, with things like Gravity Falls, Regular Show, Adventure Time, and Wander Over Yonder, where they're definitely like kid shows, but they really show a real dedication to the craft and this feeling that anything is possible. The fun thing about animation is you can do anything if you would like to. You don't have to be held back the way live action film does. It has the freedom cheerier feel of animation, and it's a fun, joyous thing to watch someone just throw all these crazy things at the wall and actually have them work. And you can tell they threw all those things at the wall and knew exactly precisely which one would work. And there's real art to that. As much as it is a corporate film, they're still kind of satirizing corporate control, and they're satirizing the corporate machine. Emmett's wall is a poster for a popular band, and he likes the song everyone likes. It's called Everything Is Awesome. Really, a lot of this movie is about individuality, and I know a lot of animated films are like, you're special, you're a special person. Everyone's a beautiful and unique stupid snowflake or whatever. And no film has actually been able to do that without seeming corny as the Lego Movie did, which is kind of surprising because it has such a satirical edge, but then it actually succeeds in trying to get across the idea that all the big corporate, more serious, I guess, less satirical animated movies do. Number 3, Coherence. This is a sturdier sci-fi genre pick than we're really used to anymore, and it feels almost like a really good 50s science fiction film or a Twilight Zone episode. I think with all its complications and everything, you could go on various theories about it, but at the same time, it's very clear. There's never a time I felt like while I was watching it that even the most mainstream audience member or the most passive viewer would be like, what's going on? It's kind of similar, you could say, to Primer, but I think unlike Primer, you could really tell what's going on, and it can be clear while still having all those theories and being a very well built, both concept-wise and with its characters. And it almost feels like both are just as important. A casual dinner party among a lot of friends, a comet that's going overhead, basically that when the comet is overhead, they're able to go into different realities of the same situation. Basically, they compare it to the film Sliding Doors, but it's a whole theory where if you make one decision, automatically there is a different reality where you've made another decision, and then those realities keep multiplying. They start to encounter themselves from these different realities, try to make sure they're in the right reality and to make sure they're safe before the comet goes over again and they can't go into these other realities. This is a concept that is really invested in the moral implications and what it would do for these characters. And number 2, Under the Skin. The story of Under the Skin is really kind of like a B horror movie, salacious kind of a grindhouse thing, if you really just think about the plot. But how he did it in this very arty, quiet way with not a lot of dialogue and creepy music and intense visuals, Jonathan Glazer definitely found an interesting way to go about this film, and I think his direction is probably the reason to see this film, because I haven't seen a director take on an idea like this in such an arty, strange way. It has such a personal feel, but also an impersonal feel at the same time. It's personal to someone who's not human, so the film has almost an inhuman feel about it. It's really interesting and very visual in a way that I would expect more from an arty European film, and Jonathan Glazer does that so excellently. It's just kind of haunting in a way. Scarlett Johansson's character is confused by humans, but there's no point about humanity. It's more about this alien's perception of this world. And this is kind of like a cult film done in a Bergman sense with Kubrick cinematography. Jonathan Glazer excellently directs a story that you never thought could have been done in a way like this. It could be an exploitation film where you have this sexy girl trapping young guys and killing them, and it could get really conventional, have a typical third act, but this film kind of rejects all of that. And my top film, what I felt was the best film of the entire year of the 2014s, of all the movies I saw, Stranger by the Lake. Frank, who goes to a lake in France on his vacation, it's a lake specifically for cruising for other gay men or hooking up with other gay men. One night he comes there very late and sees Michael, who looks like kind of a Burt Reynolds centerfold from the 70s. He sees him drowning someone. Frank doesn't call the police and doesn't warn anyone or anything like that. He seems to be more intrigued and starts falling in love with Michael as he continues to hang out at this secret lake location. It's simplicity in its storytelling, but showing how much you can do with such a simple story and how little the director's really using to tell this story, and how leisurely he's telling kind of a murder mystery. Ideas of other murder mysteries are clearly on display here, because if you look at the character of Michael, Michael almost feels to me like when you take a film noir and you have a femme fatale who the lead male straight protagonist knows is dangerous and goes after her because it's like kind of sexy, it's fun. And in here, it's like Frank goes after Michael, and Michael looks like that ideal, like a femme fatale is always a very straight male perspective idea of like a sexy woman. And Michael is straight out of male centerfold from the 70s or 80s. He's like an idea of, you know, beauty, whether he drowns someone or not. And I think the idea of being in a singular location that people have to go to every day and only seeing it from that perspective is interesting enough, really. And I think that speaks to the strength of this filmmaker, is that there's so many interesting ideas to it. There's so many long takes, there's so many beautiful location shots. It has very small independent quality to it. You can tell it's not just strictly a small independent film, but they shot it with a small crew in one location. And it's kind of like a simple film. And I kind of appreciate when you see films like that. It's almost like you're really showing what you can do as a director and a storyteller when you do something like that. You're not trying to put in complications or test, you know, what narrative can do. You're almost stripping everything to the bare bones and showing how well you can tell a story with such few little pieces. To me, why Stranger by the Lake is such an interesting film and an amazing film. So that was my top 10 list of 2014. I thought it was a pretty good year. Notice that a lot of these films were films I saw before the Oscar season. I was actually kind of disappointed by this past fall. If that shows you anything, it shows you that you should kind of keep watching movies throughout the year and not just see them during like high points and high seasons like the summer or the Christmas season. That's kind of something I really learned from this year, is you can find a lot of cool surprises if you're really looking around. If you have a top 10 list or whatever you thought the best films of the year list, or if you think I'm crap or anything like that, just comment below and leave your own top 10 list if you want. Comment below if you do have any opinions on this top 10 list, or even if you want to put something about what you thought was the worst, because why not? And subscribe if you would like to. And hope to see you more in 2015. Hopefully 2015 will be as good, if not a better cinematic year than 2014 was.